Welcome to our studio visit with Lisa Oxley. I turn it over to Lisa. If you sign in, you can just go ahead and say hi in the chat. We're going to be recording.
Hi.
So we have it to put on the website later. We're in Lisa's beautiful downtown studio space, and I'll let her take it over. I'm going to be on the other side, kind of positioning the computer.
Okay, well, welcome. If there's somebody there. Yay. I'm not sure where to start. Basically, this is work that's fairly recent, and I'm thinking of it in terms of two-sided paintings. For a long time, I've been involved in this sort of my research project about the dioramas of Louis Daguerre. And Daguerre, everyone knows Daguerre from photography, but before that, he created, this was like pre-cinema, these paintings that were similar to panorama, where there was a whole architectural structure and people would pay and, like an entrance fee, like they were going to the cinema, and sit down and watch this painting change and move according to how the light hit the painting. So I'm really fascinated with that, because I'm fascinated with architecture and systems of display. And so it sort of struck me that, they were massive architectural constructions for viewing a painting. So I've been sort of interested in that idea of the two-sided painting and the painting that's activated by light. So that's what's working. I actually researched, all of his writings on it. So they were painted often on muslin, and the muslin is slightly transparent. And according to what I can show you on this slide. Took a long time to figure out how to do this, but so this painting, I guess the best way is to look at it this way.
With the light behind it, sure.
Well, no, let's look at it first. So this is
That's the front.
the front,
And that's the
this is the back,
Oh, cool.
right? And this, if the light is coming through, if it's reflecting, the image changes according to light, right?
Wow.
So, this idea of sort of illusion and that's connected to painting for me, and theatricality. And so then I started working with stitching into the paintings. So
It's painted, that's so.
no,
cool.
this is thread. This is thread, and I love the way it looks on the back. So eventually I will.
Use that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah, I will have these on stands that
Like,
can sort of move around and become architecture as well, create
Right.
worlds.
Well, there's all this like reference to, yeah, that kind of visual tricks, right? So that
Yeah.
the airbrush, like to make things smooth in photography.
Exactly.
That, that sort of touching up of the surface of the photo. And then the light that, of course, is capturing the moment, but it's really a process like too.
Yeah.
It captures the form that's there. It's beautiful. The color relationships are really subtle too, in the way that they create light. I mean, it feels like a lot of things have like a kind of glow from within, which is like that backlighting.
Mhm.
Especially if you look in like the sort of window areas in the painting itself, it's
In here, yeah.
It feels like the light's coming from inside the painting instead of outside, which is really hard to do.
Yeah. Here's another one. I also just do straightforward paintings that are not, that don't have that sort of trick to them.
Other than the motifs showing up, like a sort of pattern motifs that are that repeat in some of them, right? And so they kind of deal with the staging.
Yeah.
That's a discussion.
Yeah, there's always a sort of iterative process where something will appear here and then it'll come back out over here, and you know, this one, what happened with this one was, actually, this was originally just green painter's tape that I was
Right,
using
yeah, broad tape,
to like
yeah,
mask it, and then I was sort of like looking at it thinking, actually, I really like it with just the green tape, you know? But then I thought, and so then I recreated the green tape out of muslin, painted muslin. And then I wanted the pattern, I don't know, it just goes through this
Yeah, it
whole
really
process
is
where
that
I'm like,
broad tape green.
Yeah, it
yeah,
does.
then I take it away, and then it's like, okay, but I really liked that, so then I do it on another painting, that one is kind of a redo of that idea. So there's this constant feeding into the work of previous paintings. And it's a kind of a collage effect. Yeah.
You can really see that collage effect in this one, I think, in particular, maybe because of like the little pins and the ribbon around the edges and some of the like little detail elements that are starting to almost emerge from the surface, which I guess that's part of the stitching, right? So it's the building out and adding an extra layer to further create that optical illusion of diving or being a part of the space or sharing the space with the painting so that it's in this physical reality.
Yeah, and the stitch is also like a line, like I also think of these as drawings in a way.
Yeah.
You know, so I do have, I have like these paintings that are much more painterly, and they're, because you can't really do that on the muslin if you're wanting to get that transparency. It has to be always very light. To keep the transparency, to keep that illusion happening. But so I think of the stitching as another way of creating a line. And another way of creating surface that, so that the surface, it can't get really too dense with paint, but it can with other things. Yeah.
And, it also, the other thing that comes up for me, I think because you're talking about the verso of the back is like illuminated manuscripts or things that would have been painted on vellum, or even like tantra paintings where both sides are considered, both sides of the piece of paper, and that the image is this sort of ephemeral space in between the two. Like you can't really ever see the whole image. You have to kind of flip it back and forth. So it does feel very, they do feel very floaty, spiritual when you're looking at them, probably partially because of that, but also because they have all these like multiple perspective points or ways of entry that feel, I mean, you're definitely using camera, right, to get the illusion of space and just enough contours to help me feel a sense of place, and then you sort of stop. Right, so it's like there's a dematerialization of the point of view, and then a reappearance of it. It's like it comes together.
Yeah, it's this layering of images. I also think of it as like I'll often work with architecture and installation. It's usually I do that like I have a project in mind, but it's been a while since I've had a project like that, and then there was COVID, and so now I'm just sort of making individual paintings, which is weird to me, but I have to always kind of trick my mind into thinking, well, this will eventually be interacting with the architecture in some way. So and then in that sense, I always think of the architecture as kind of a model for like a psychic state, right? So it's kind of like these layering of memories or places, or like the patterns that you'll see on a wall when you were a kid, and that sort of seeing that pattern again sort of prompts a memory. Yeah, and these actually did come from like now that I'm talking about this, but they did come from drawings. They were. It's like you find the original.
Here, I can bring that laptop over there. That's easier. Let's do that.
Working on it.
And are these places you've seen? Or do you just imagine them?
I imagine them, or I find photographs, or sometimes they are places that I've seen or been to.
So it looks sort of retro, all of it, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, some of these came from like a super like old architectural digest
Oh, yeah,
that I found.
Especially the patterning.
Yeah,
I like it.
and you know, I have that in my family. My dad was an architect, my brother's an architect. Yeah, there's a lot
Oh,
of
gosh, like Morgan
things with
Fisher,
architecture.
like Morgan Fisher's father was an architect.
Uh-huh.
And it shows.
So
up
it
in
just sort
her-
of sticks to me, all that
Right.
architecture stuff, but it's also a kind of. I don't know, it's like a model for something else,
Mhm.
right?
Take a look at the. See if I can get an angle right with the drawings. too.
Oh, and these are what I'm working on right now. It's definitely going much more abstract.
Mhm.
But I found all these old wallpapers. You know, this one was I ordered from Germany.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh,
Oh my God.
amazing.
It's amazing.
Oh my God, they have the best
It's
wallpaper.
amazing.
Yeah, so I've got all these old pieces of wallpaper and tried to integrate them. Can just do weird things with the frame is also a really important thing for me as well. And these are gouache. These are more architectural. These are a little bit older.
Beautiful.
Yeah, the surfaces are great. But it's neat to see how all the experimental surfaces too, and as they appear in your paintings later, you can see it, the
Mhm,
spray and the sort of wood grain and
mhm.
the pattern. You can move my bag if you want. I'm sorry, it's on,
Oh,
you're in your space here. You can
Oh,
just
it's fine.
measure the napkins about. I'm like a little clutter bug everywhere I go.
I am too. Like
Sorry.
usually my studio is not this neat.
I'm always really impressed by people who have neat studios. Like, wow, how do you
No,
do
it's
it?
not
I
like
don't
this.
know.
I
I feel like my
got
feet
there a
stick
little
to the
early.
floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's gotta feel a little bit like organized chaos if you're gonna be in that space of mixing things up, I think.
Right, yeah. I like
Can't be
this one
too clean or too dirty, just right.
Yeah, and then I have these large ones these are a little bit older. That are just basically architectural paintings.
Oh, wow. My first impulse is to run to hold it up, you know?
Oh, yeah. Are you gonna hang it or do you want me to hold it out?
I can hang it. That's straight.
Yep, looks good. It's my Zoom laptop camera work. Let's see. So some of the surfaces are actually sanded, huh? Like, some of the surfaces are actually sanded.
No, these are canvas. These are
Oh,
not-
it
these
looks
are-
like this was sanded with sandpaper
Oh,
almost.
sanded, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And it's got some fabric on it.
this
Wow.
one has fabric. Yeah, it's also, you know, being in this building, they throw out all this.
Oh, wow.
These
That's super
tons of
interesting.
fabric, so it's kind of a you know, really fun when they do that.
So are these also all theoretical spaces, like in your mind, kind of?
Yes, yes. Well, this one originally were based off of a building, I think it was one of these buildings that at the very top of the building, I used to teach English.
Mhm.
There was a program for the maintenance workers in these buildings, have English classes. And they did them in the top floor of the Atlantic Richfield offices, so they were these abandoned offices downtown,
Wow.
incredible spaces, like. And they were just like abandoned, like it looks like the apocalypse happened and they're just left from like 1980.
Wow.
It's wild. So that's where all of these originally came from the photographs that I took there. And then I just sort of ripped off of that.
It's so great you had access to those spaces because.
Yeah.
Eventually they're all gonna just be condos.
Yeah, I mean, that was when I used to live in Spain, and when I first came back, that's what I was doing.
And then the light is so vibrant in this one in particular, like the. Sort of light blue gray wash on top of that vibrant lemon yellow is beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it feels like it's.
Yeah, this one, I don't consider it quite yet finished, but maybe it is finished, Cause I do like that sense of just always leaving it sort of open.
Yeah, it's almost like, what do you take, how much can you take away? And how
Exactly.
much do you need to leave there? For
Yeah.
that space to.
Yeah, it's always for me, like, what's the minimum that you need for it to still be a picture of
Yeah.
something?
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's all the little subtleties, like a little bit of metallic there and a little bit of metallic in the pin, like. Small little choices like that you probably can't see in photograph at all, but that's metallic and that's in relationship with the metallic pin, and then. These dragging marks, become like a faux texture. This almost signs for glass, like it's completely, it's the same mark, but it's something solid, something transparent. It's really playing with the language of what the marks can mean. Do you like looking at like masterwork painting?
Oh my God,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can tell, yeah.
Yeah,
The
I mean, that's where,
surfaces,
yeah, that's how I started. Yeah, just like when I was younger, when I was, in my early 20s, I was in Europe and I would just go to like museums and spend hours and hours in the Prado. Yeah,
How they painted a single hair. Or
Yeah.
the surface of a pearl.
or just like how they painted air.
Yeah.
Like
Sfumato,
just
yeah.
stage,
It's
like-
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's such low tech with such a high tech end result. I mean, it's so magical to look
Yeah.
and see all those little tiny nature tricks. Like I always laughed at the screening, the evening post paintings, those Norman Rockwell paintings when I was a kid. 'Cause my grandma had all the prints. I was like, oh God, these are so cheesy. And then I went to see, there was a retrospective of his work at the museum in Atlanta, the Contemporary Art Museum there, and it was the amount of skillful weird tricks that guy had up his sleeves, where it was just.
I don't think I've ever seen a Norman Rockwell in real.
They're,
I don't think I've seen it in real life.
they're crazy looking. They don't look, I mean, it's weird because they don't look like anything like the reproductions, and they do, like if you take a photograph. But the surface is so crazy on, the way the water's painted, or the way that a board is painted, or the way that like even just the rosiness of a cheek, like the skin tone, or the wateriness of eyes. Like there's a level of understanding that's like looking at a Rembrandt or something, and you're like, oh my God, this guy I can understand why everything he painted was published, like every single thing, because it was sort of an incredible amount of technical skill, the cutesiness of it and the genre, it's not as interesting. But one of the biggest collectors of his work I've heard is Steven Spielberg, which when you look at the lighting in a lot of the paintings, it makes total sense.
But that makes sense, because it is also that sort of Americana kind of like idealized thing that Spielberg has in his films too.
Totally. It's fascinating to me, but that, that idea that generationally there's a color, a space, or these set of sort of organizing structures that we inherit, and then we have the language to build on, I mean, to me, your color palette feels very much like what my childhood looked like, which is interesting. I think maybe that's one of the reasons I'm so drawn to you into your work. But it reminds me, I remember as a kid, like living at home, my parents' first home had like this sort of golden broad, wall to wall shed road.
Yeah,
carpet,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
that's so, yeah, like in that mustard.
Yep, and the
kitchen.
avocado green and mustard
Yeah.
and burnt orange.
Yeah,
kitchen.
Yeah, no,
It just reminds me of that so much,
that's
like
in there.
what was just really beautiful when I was like a toddler, like that, all that color and that light that was around, it was really a very particular moment in time.
And patterns too, right? A lot of
Patterns, yeah.
Patterns and linoleum patterns and curtains, like
Or all that metallic wallpaper, do you remember all
Metallic.
that crazy metallic pattern?
yeah, my mom had that.
And mirrors on the ceiling
Yeah.
and water beds and,
Yeah.
like it was really a restructuring of even what a room looked like. It was crazy. I mean, it was a wild, aesthetically kind of a wild time.
Yeah.
Sunken living rooms,
Yep.
right? And
Like, and circular couches and
Yeah.
stuff, like just things that were reorganizing the way people sat in a room. And it was like
Yeah.
really
And
broad.
mirrors, like,
Yeah.
they were really into mirrors back then.
Totally. It's
I'm
amazing.
so curious about this landscape on the bottom with the smoke.
Oh,
Like, what
yeah.
is that, like, you just, that piece,
I,
it feels different than the other ones, and like, it feels like there's this bit of action going
Yeah.
on.
yeah, it's more kind of, I can't remember where that photo came from.
I really like it.
But. Yeah, I don't know, I choose images often just, they seem emblematic or signify some, again, it's similar to the architecture, they signify some kind of memory or state or psychical state.
Yeah, it feels like an event, like there's an event.
I think it might have been actually the first Iraq War.
Oh, okay,
When Saddam set fire to the oil fields, I think that's where that image came from.
oh, okay.
But I'm
and
not
that's what the pools
referencing
are.
that.
Yeah,
That in the photograph, it's just that image has some sort of charge for me.
yeah. I really like that.
Well, it says here that for some reason, the Zoom link I'm running is not the same link that for comments. Let me try and see if I can zoom from here.
Oh, so they're in another.
So they're in
thing?
another chat.
Oh,
Okay, so.
yeah, I think I have another version of it here.
Hey, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry. We've been zooming from, I guess, a different link. I thought it was the same link.
So
I
weird.
feel so bad. Oh, did you hold the meeting again? Damn it. Damn it. Is anybody still left? Oh, there are people there now. Oh, good. Oh, you're still there. Awesome. Okay, so we're just gonna, I've been zooming. I guess I thought I was on this link and I just was recording and paid no attention. So we're gonna go ahead and keep going. We're in Lisa's studio, which you can see is surrounded by color and light and all of this beautiful sort of architectural spaces that are depicted in the work. And she's been talking about it. And so I guess we can start with the people that are there, just do it again. And we'll have 2 Zoom recordings, or we'll have this one and then the one that's also going in from the different angle, because apparently I signed on to the wrong account today because, of course.
It's one of those days.
Stitch them together and.
Okay, we'll figure it out. Yeah.
So we were talking, we've moved on to the architectural work, but in the beginning we were showing.
Yeah, we can start over here with.
Yeah, we were showing this work that's on muslin. And it's kind of between drawing and painting. And these paintings would be, eventually they will be 2-sided paintings, that I'm gonna build stands for them so they can sort of live in the space and they're activated by light. So when light passes through them, if there's something painted on the other side, you can show the little trick over here.
Right.
When there's something painted, so this is the front side. And this is the back side. And this is when light passes through.
And you can kind of see that that's how she's playing. Both in that piece and then in this piece in the
Yeah.
corner here. And then because a lot of them have stitching on the surface too, the reverse side, it has the stitching details in verso also. All creating like an extra depth or little things like pins and fabric that come off of the surface. And then the stitching becomes like a line.
So this, oh, well, this you want to see through the light.
Yeah. So really the reverse is almost this, like the ghost painting, right? That's underneath
Yeah.
everything else. And a lot of the references are to photography and specifically illusionistic installation of photography.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that in the beginning as well. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit again.
What was I talking about?
Daguerre, yeah.
Oh, right. So yes, so Daguerre, yeah. So they were based off of a sort of late 19th century. Well, actually, it's pre-photography. So mid 19th century invention by Louis Daguerre. And it was that era when there was like the panorama and the diorama and the magic lantern and all those sort of optical weird inventions. So the diorama was they were these, I think there's one in London and there's might be one in France somewhere that's still existing. But people, it was before cinema, so people, it was a form of entertainment. People would buy a ticket, they'd sit in this building that had shutters that would open and close, and they'd be looking at a painting. And depending on how the light hit the painting, you would see, a volcano erupt. So the painting would change and move. And it was kind of like this spectacle that I find that all really interesting to me. The fact that, they created this architectural space for the purpose of viewing a painting. And that, the paintings would move and change and be activated by light. And it's relating to what would later become cinema and screens. So all of that idea of screens and illusion is in this work. And I guess what we were talking about, the imagery itself comes from architecture. Because I always work with architecture and I actually install the paintings in the architectural space, the exhibition space, work with the architecture and off the architecture and thinking of architecture as a kind of model of a psychic space or a psychological space. Like those kind of dreams you have where you're in a house and the house represents, it's not that flat-footed, but yeah, so that's where the imagery comes from.
Well, we were talking about also too, that, just like that sort of dreamlike space or that spiritual space, because it's almost like you're this process of removing marks until the space almost falls apart. And then, but there's just enough information to give you a sense of perspective and depth. And that the pieces sort of hover in that in between. Yeah, they're just coming into being or they're just falling apart. So it's like you're seeing them through a cloud or something, like it's just about to appear or it's just about to disappear. You're not really quite sure you're in that liminal space. And so the surfaces become like that. They sort of disintegrate as mark, and then they also become form because a lot of that, like if you look really closely at some of these, like some of the paint tricks for all the painters out there, it's just like really crazy co-relationships here that make that sense of like light coming from the inside of the surface. There's like silver on the edges and airbrush. And then textile or texture with a string. And so you're not sure what's a mark and what's stitch, what's painted and what's part of the fabric. Like you're not entirely sure what you're looking at for a while, which is this really, like you feel like you're discovering things as you're looking. This one also, so this one I sewed on the back. So the back is the front. So I actually like the back one better, almost better than the front. Beautiful from behind. Yeah. So
continue working on this in time, there'll be another painting back here. And then here, yeah, this is that feeling that it's sort of a space that you recognize or not, or it's just sort of dreamline.
Ephemeral, you know, it seems like people wax a lot of ephemera, like there's a lot of, like, pieces of wallpaper here and, you know, yeah, they're beautiful. But you see all the experimentation that like finds itself in the painting later. Sure, go ahead, go for it. Hi, Tanya. Hi.
Oh, Muslim. No, not so much. It's more like the way a dream unfolds, not so much like my necessarily my dreams. Although, like, definitely, I was saying in the other Zoom meeting that.
Right, and the other Zoom meeting I messed up.
I was saying that the architecture, like in my case, you know, I come from a family of architects, and so there was always a lot of like architectural digests and things like that I remember from my childhood. So a lot of that is in here. So there is a sense of like my memories of the way my, you know, house was, or my grandmother's house was, or the houses that we looked through and these magazines. And then the house itself is kind of, I mean, I don't like to try and pin that down too much and say, well, it represents my childhood, blah, blah, blah. But I imagine that there's something about, like this one, for example, is called domestic tranquility. I imagine that there's something to do with my own sense of home and you know, place and all of that in there. But I don't like to get too pin down that too much.
We were also talking about just the nostalgia of the color, because it has like, it definitely, there's, we see a lot of this like, greens and oranges and like, sort of burnt yellow colors, umber colors from the 70s, from childhood, like in late early 70s, like in, it's really apparent, but then you see these other things, like there's clearly that's she was talking about that frog tape green, you know, that dates some of the passages, because she was trying to recreate that frog tape green, because it's material that she was using, and then it became part of the color palette for the work, which is fascinating, which takes it to now. So it's this mixture of like a memory from childhood and now, you know,
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, all these times overlap in these different spaces and time, and places and memories and, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that these take place in these, yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think that it's like I make the work first, and then I try to explain it, rather than the other way around. It's rather like, yeah, to like think of the idea. I want to make a painting about, you know, my memories from my childhood and my dreams and architecture. I don't, and then I work, no, I do it the way. First, the work comes, and then I try and say, well, what is this? You know? And then it just sort of leads me down different rabbit holes, like I went through this whole rabbit hole with wallpaper, you know, like one day, you know, just going onto Etsy and finding like all the little wallpapers that you can buy. And how those, you know, because that is the way memory works for me. Like I'll see something like a pattern that'll suddenly jog a memory of a whole period in my life. Like I can see on your wall, there's a pattern, right? That, yeah.
Pull out that roll of German wallpaper that she's got like amazing wallpaper, tons of little bits of box of it, you know, like little pieces that she says. Look at this. Isn't that insane? It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, this was that night that I was like up until. Let's see, like going down this rabbit hole on the wallpaper. It's like, because they become like signifiers or indexes of sort of different times and places. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like you're always looking at them. When you were, you know, when you were a child, you're sort of looking at them, and then all of this other stuff is happening in your life. And you don't think that's important, because it's just a corner of your kitchen, but it's almost as if that was absorbing all this other stuff. Yeah.
When I studied college, where we were for me, and it's all about seeing things in the wallpaper that there's wallpaper.
I love that. Yeah, yeah. Yellow wallpaper.
Yeah, that's a really good call.
Manifestations of female, I would say, mania, like hysteria, anorexia, bulimia, I was all about that. Folks, but it's about living in the.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and pattern is also that there's something. No, I don't think it's wrong.
But I mean, just the use of wallpaper though implies like an interiority, right? And so that's, and I think it's like in some ways, kind of an interiority, right? So it's pattern oriented and it's got a space and that's a very essentialist, right? But ornaments, yeah. But it does for those associations and the yellow wallpaper is a really good call to reference because you do, there's that golden light in all of them. And that pattern, there's a tension between, is the space falling apart or is it coming together? That is, you know, this fractured moment that could be beautiful or it could be frightening, you know, sort of in between those two places, which I think that's where art occurs, right? We don't really have a language to explain what we're feeling, but we know we have something profound. And maybe that's what these remind me of, because I see a lot of stuff from my childhood too. That is in the color and the pattern in the spaces and the kind of light that's there, that make them, I think, really resonate a lot.
for me personally as well, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially like in some of these little experimental collages, like the white's really profound, you know?
I just downloaded the yellow wallpaper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good reference, it's really smart.
Cause also like this one, like in this one, I just, you know, this will be, I mean, I originally thought I'm making these patterns to then later cut up and put into other things, but just in the making of it also, like, you know, repetitive act of a pattern. And then it has these subtle shifts, color, of
Yeah, it's
color.
beautiful.
And I mean, I was doing that because it was a period when I had a really intense teaching schedule and I couldn't be that much in the studio and I just didn't feel creative. Like I would just come in here, I was exhausted. But what can I do that's just like repetitive, meditative? And it's kind of like, yeah, like similar to women's labor, you know, like.
They're realizing that that's why our grandmothers did it. Yeah, I have had moments like that, like, oh, this is why my grandma, like, technically.
Yeah, you don't.
Did lace for
it
hours
makes
and
you
hours and
sane.
hours.
It makes you sane, but then it's also insane because you start to like see in the negative space, these other shapes and it does that thing with figure ground.
But even just the color relationships here are so complicated, like this is a much more violet, light blue, than this is, you know, much more green. Light blue, you know, it's really active, the color is super active, and I can see how this, having like being in a room with this for a long period of time would have a kind of profound vibrant effect in your body, because it does vibrate a lot. In the way that wallpaper does, like, you know. But also in the way that it brings heat is. Just this little area, the shift in color is like so poetic, I mean, it's beautiful. And there's some things that you guys can't see that are like really obvious in person, like there's a lot of little tiny moments of metallic paints, or even like a surface of a pen will have like a metallic shimmer to it, like a pearlescence, you know, that or there's like ribbon on the edges of the painting, like it's just playing with like color and lighting. I don't know, it's gonna be, I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of dorky. You kind of like that, I do too, it's beautiful. But you know, just to see that the pattern falling apart and pulling back together again, over and over again, really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I don't work on one at a time. I can't do that. But my studio mate does that. And I'm like so amazed. Like she can like come in and like, I'm gonna do this painting. It's like a big painting. I'm gonna just keep working on it until I'm finished. I can't do that. I have to